beautiful example of mindful consumption and what we gathered here and filled our hearts with. So thank you very much. When we sang the opening hymn this morning, we certainly want to ask ourselves, we are of life, its shining gift, the measure of all things. Up from the dust our temples lift, our vision soars on wings. Do we believe that about ourselves, right? And in this time, when I look at the wisdom of this room, both young and old, pretty much here I would say that we have all come to know that enough is enough. We have everything we need. And as Alan said in Joys and Sorrows, we need to accept and be aware of the damage we're causing ourselves by greed. And so, during the holiday season, it's this time of secular and spiritual traditions that are wonderful. They all have deep meaning. From All Souls Day, where we remembered loved ones who have gone before us, through Thanksgiving, and well into the new year, where we will reflect on this past year and make resolutions as we move forward into the new year. And while there is deep meaning to be found in all of these holidays, we know that as a culture, we are bombarded by a sustained campaign to create an insatiable desire to consume goods, things, to give and receive. And this force doesn't just come from stores and marketing. It comes from within our family, among our friends, even in companies we work in, and perhaps more importantly, within ourselves, as we deal with our own expectations, as well as others. So we don't always hear the word mindful and consumption, and I reflected on this a few years back and wanted to revisit it, because it's important for our community as Unitarian Universalists, as we engage in the world and with our families, to understand what this means. Adam Smith called it a new kind of personal wealth and said it turns out money can buy happiness after all, when consumers create a market for mindful consumption. And so whether it's post-COVID, inflation, our own economic changes, we're all in the midst of reevaluating how we give and receive gifts. What is mindful consumption? How do we make gift giving and receiving more meaningful? And how can we define our spiritual or ethical cost of living? I want to share a story by a gentleman called Dr. Abe Thomas, and he wrote, "I was traveling from my hotel to the airport in a large city in Asia. While I passed a busy traffic area, I noticed an elderly lady by the street asking alms to people who stopped at the traffic light. I asked the driver to slow down so I could help her with some money, and I did. The young man who was the driver said he appreciated what I did, and he mentioned that during the time, their country was celebrating a national festival, and most businesses gave away expensive presents to their employees that already have the means to buy them or already have them. He wished that if the affluent in society redirected those resources to needy around the area, the city would be a better place, and many lives would be changed for the good." He added that that's what he thought God expected from us, not an extravagant exchange of expensive gifts among the affluent and fortunate people, rather resources to those who really need help. He ends by saying, "It made perfect sense to me from what I heard from the taxi driver who only made about $100 a month to support his parents and his family." So think of $600 billion. $600 billion. That's what's expected to be spent during the Christmas season. Now, many of those gifts will not be used by the recipient. And the idea that you can purchase gifts and receive gifts is something that is really intrinsic to our culture. The Reverend Timothy Dombach, author of Making the Annual Pledge Drive Obsolete, wrote, "Nothing you can purchase, buy, own, possess, or collect, nor any trip you can take to any part of the world, nor any sight you will ever see, is more valuable than the money you give to others in need." Perhaps this quote is the most enlightened stage of mindful consumption that I can give you. Now, the stress that we have of giving, some of us have outgrown of that, right? For others, our godchildren or grandchildren, nieces and nephews, may not have outgrown that. And so, we struggle. Some of us have economic struggles. Some of us have our health struggles. And some of us, it's a complete turnoff. And yet, we also recognize in the face of a young child the joy of getting a gift. And so, it's not an and or. It's really understanding that we can get sucked up in consumption if we're not mindful about it. So, what if we could be a consumer that actually makes us feel better, relieves tension, promotes emotional well-being, and is spiritually transcendent? And for $29.99 in 3 easy installments, you can have that. No, that's what we call mindful consumption. So the first thing I suggest to us is to be mindful. May our thoughts and actions be done in how we reduce stress. May we relish our experiences in the present moment instead of being anxious about the next party, the next function, the next shopping trip, or even trying to get the next ride. According to researchers from 3 universities, Harvard, Virginia, and British Columbia, they said most people don't know the basic scientific facts about happiness and what it brings and how it sustains. So they don't know how to use their money to acquire it. They go on to say, perhaps our biggest misunderstanding is the link between increased wealth and increased well-being. The correlation between these things has been shown to be modest at best. Another study that they quoted said that beyond roughly $75,000, income does not do anything to boost our day-to-day moods. And that's partially due to the fact that the more someone makes, the more they what? Spend. And so they really are still in the same position of not being financially well. Now, consumption, like I said, is in and of itself not bad. We consume oxygen, food, resources. The key is what we do with that consumption. As Unitarian Universalists, we are especially mindful because we want to show the act of consumption as something that transcends the consumption itself, that produces something greater than the cost of the consumption. The greater good could be economic, such as an experience over a thing. It could be ethical, such as consuming less meat, which costs exponentially more to produce, or spiritual, as it brings us closer to our loved ones, our neighbors, community, and those in need. In fact, it can be all of those at the same time. So one of the things we talked about is experiences. As opposed to giving a gift, often with my godchildren, I'll give an experience. Go out to a movie, do something, go to the park. The anticipation of going to something is a gift, doing it, and then talking about it afterwards. It's much more memorable. So the key to valuing an experience, like French lessons, how many, probably not going to go there, French, okay. All right. the key to the experiences over a new thing is that the new thing kind of blends into the background. And the experience will stay with you. Okay, so you could take a karate class. Is that a little bit better than French? Okay. Or you could pay for your grandchild or your niece or your nephew or your child or friend to take a karate class. That would be the experience. But what they say is the best thing is if you add, for example, a mother-child class together. If you do something together, it builds closer ties between the two of you and expands your experience. I wanted to invite Donna Janeski to just give an example in her life of how that happened to her.
My grandkids usually visit us together, coming up from Orlando to spend the weekend now and then. And on this particular weekend in December of 2008, 7-year-old Dawson visited me without her brother. My husband had planned to take off for a little road trip, as it was his time taking Christmas vacation from school. So that meant Dawson and I would be spending the weekend together, just the two of us. I scouted out the papers to see what events would be happening and where I could take her. I had several things in mind when the kids visit, like the museum, the zoo, special plays, movies, etc. So Dawson arrived on a Friday, and we were up bright and early on Saturday. It was then that I listened to the news and heard we were in for a hard freeze that would be below 26 degrees and would ruin our full crop of unpicked citrus. By the way, I have picked citrus, and it's in the coffee. I hope you all get some lemons and tangerines today. But where was my husband when I needed him? This meant that I would be doing a lot of work getting the yard prepared for the freeze, as well as doing something special about all the oranges, tangerines, and lemons hanging so lusciously from our branches. Our day began with our usual time in bed together when Dawson comes tiptoeing into the bed and we talk and plan the day. We talked about the impending freeze and the need to prepare the yard and pick the fruit. So, after a quick breakfast, we bundled up and went about our work. We covered all the plants with sheets and took in the more delicate ones. Dawson was right by my side as we scurried about, helping me to cover the plants completely and secure them with rocks and clothespins that we make sure the sheets don't come off. "What's next, Grandma?" was her frequent query as we hurried to do our work. Remember, she's only 7 years old. She's 21 now. "Well, we have to pick all the fruit on the trees." This was a daunting task since the orange tree is quite tall. I got the ladder and scissors and baskets to put the oranges and lemons into. We picked the low-hanging fruit together, and then I got up on the ladder and tossed the fruit down to Dawson, who collected it and placed it in the baskets. This took a considerable amount of time. Our cheeks were ruddy and we were chilly, but we had a great sense of accomplishment. I was amazed at all the assistance I got from Dawson, who never once complained, but seemed to relish each new task before her. "What's next, Grandma?" When I was satisfied that we had set up the yard for the freeze, I held Dawson close to thank her for all the help. I suggested that we treat ourselves to a movie that just came out, All American Girl. She did not respond enthusiastically, so I began to tell her what a wonderful movie it was and how we would get ice cream afterwards, and so on. I was trying to make it sound more and more enticing, and I couldn't understand her reluctance to go to what I considered a treat. She kept trying to make me understand why she didn't want to go to the movie. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I just want to be with you, Grandma." And then it hit me. She found no more joy in tagging along after me and participating in whatever I was doing than in sitting through a movie in the dark. Her idea of fun was cooking with Grandma, picking oranges, feeding the chickens, and just being with me. It hit me like a ton of bricks when I finally understood, and it melted my heart beyond what words can describe. I just want to be with you, Grandma.
Thank you, Donna. I think as we enter this holiday, we remember that something that Mother Teresa mentioned, that the greatest poverty in the United States is loneliness. And it's poignant. And so relationships, whether it's your granddaughter, a friend, a neighbor, reaching out, doing something, to me, really is a way that we can mindfully consume. And if we're going to spend on somebody, that they would appreciate that. Whatever our income is, the mindfulness of the cost of living goes beyond financial cost. Cambridge businessman Philippe Zelensky defined it as our spiritual cost of living. He says there's a financial cost of living that we need to be mindful to live within our means. What is our spiritual bank account? How are we investing our time in activities that boost virtue, good wishes, peace, problem solving, and altruism? If we're going to spend a little extra, why don't we look at those areas? Instead of wasting valuable spiritual resources or even going into bankruptcy through greed, anger, creating problems, or being anxious or selfish, let's redefine how we both as youth and adults look at the holiday season. How are we creating experiences over just consuming material goods? For the children that might be listening and the young people, can you think of something that you'd like to do with your parents or grandparents or your aunts and uncles? It's not just about doing something for them, it's doing something with them. For example, you could say, I'll do the dishes. But it might be better to say, let's do the dishes together. Family projects where each person contributes. For example, putting together a basket of food for a family or senior citizen in need. And this can be done among our friends here. As a church community in fellowship with one another, what do we as Unitarian Universalists do to build our collective spiritual bank account? It costs time and money to do things like the Thanksgiving dinner that we had a couple weeks ago, to go and participate in eye care and make sure that social justice issues are being accomplished in our community. Just this past Friday, I was talking with Ellen Weiss, and you may know her. She's the founder of Read USA. She expressed her gratitude for our literacy sponsorship, our sponsorship of the school book distribution at Arlington Elementary School. She mentioned that we are the only church in Jacksonville that sponsors a school. And she said, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Jacksonville truly expresses its values in the work it does in the community. That is part of our spiritual bank account. That's what we have together as individuals and as a community. So during these holidays, I wish you true joy in creating the moments and experiences and consuming things mindfully that will make you happier, more contentful, and more at peace. And at the same time, recognizing the joy in the face of that child that you may never see if you give your gift to the Salvation Army, but you know that will happen. And so this is what I wish for us. And today, we're going to do our meditation after the sermon, and Karen's going to come up and lead you with a responsive reading. And you will look, Crystal will put it up on the screen, and come on up, Karen. Yeah. And these are some words from a book that was done that we actually used years ago, how to make an annual pledge drive obsolete. We haven't quite gotten there yet. But um, but his words on mindful consumption really speak to us and what we just spoke about today. And I want you to participate in the reading with Karen. She will begin, and then you will read in the italic section.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's seal Peter's words, and I'll start. We commit to a different and more fulfilling way of life with an authentic relationship with self, others, and the planet. Confront the consumer culture and be a forward-looking church. Nurture warm and caring relationships. Practice voluntary simplicity, leading exceedingly good lives on very little money. Reduce consumption of meat. For example, go meatless on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, or go vegetarian. Engage in service projects in Jacksonville and beyond. Confront myths of scarcity.